What happened during the Void Century? What is the will of D? And what actually is the One Piece? A couple more years, one last saga. It's really hard to believe that One Piece is coming to a close soon, allegedly at least. With 25 years of publication, it started to seem like the story would just go on forever, but all good things must come to an end, even if Oda-sensei is being a little bit, let's say, optimistic about his estimates. However, what's even harder to believe is how many open questions we still have to be answered. How many mysteries still need solving, how many people and places and events we still have to see in the story. And so I took to Twitter, and together with you, we found 146 things that we still need to see before the end of One Piece. And so let's start with what many fans think will be the setting of the next arc. We still need to see Elbaf, the land of the giants, and concerning Elbaf, we still have a few questions like, who is Loki, the prince that Big Mom mentioned on Whole Cake Island, who Lola was engaged to? Will we meet other Norse mythology inspired characters like Thor or Odin? Well, actually, I guess we already met Odin in Wano, so that might be a bit too many Odins for one story. In Big Mom's flashback, we also saw what appeared to be a massive tree on the island. Is this the fabled Adam tree? We also know that while the giants have a strong connection to Norse mythology, a certain red-haired pirate who still needs to reunite with Luffy also has a Viking-inspired ship. So we have to ask, what is Shanks' connection to Elbaf? And before we reach the final destination, 𝙬𝚎𝚐𝚐, we're still missing one road poneglyph. Where is it? Is it on Elbaf? And speaking of 𝙬𝚎𝚐𝚐, we obviously have a load of questions about this mysterious island as well. The first being, well, where exactly is it? And what was so outrageously funny that it ended up with laugh in its name? What exactly was Roger too early for in arriving there? Elbaf and 𝙬𝚎𝚐𝚐 are the two islands the Straw Hats absolutely 100% still need to visit before the end of One Piece. However, there are still loads of other locations that we're wondering about. One place in particular that we need to learn a lot about is God Valley, but we'll probably only get to see anything about it through flashbacks. We probably won't visit this location in person on account that it's completely disappeared, which raises the questions, what happened on God Valley and why did it vanish? But these three places are far from the only ones we still have questions about. Other places we're still curious about but aren't necessarily likely to get answers before the end of the story include Lodestar Island, and the mystery and its importance in teaching pirates about the poneglyphs, the fabled Emerald City, a mythic place on par with the Golden City on Skypiea, and where and what was the thing that we saw sucking Cabone Bitch and the Fire Tank pirates into the sky. Also, before we saw Buggy get imprisoned and pulled down, he was searching for Captain John's treasure. Where and what is that treasure? Does it have anything to do with his recent promotion in rank? Oh, also, quick shout out to Vin and Tavio, the 2 subscribers of the day, both having me helped increase my bounty closer to 100 million berries in overtaking treble. And it's not just places we haven't been to that we have questions about. What about those islands we have been to? Questions like, why is it always day on Enies Lobby? How were the gates of justice constructed? My personal vote goes to the unspeakable power of Awakened Bueno. What were the giant silhouettes we saw in the Florian Triangle? Where are they building the bridge on Tequila Wolf to? How will Luffy destroy Fishman Islands? What happens during the reverie on Marijoa? How was the Red Line created? What was Zanisha's punishment that led to Zoe moving around for centuries? How were Wano's borders closed? And let's not forget the ever important moon. You know, sometimes I do feel bad for anime only watchers because they don't get to ask questions like, why are there 7 moons? Are the Sky Islanders from the moon? What is Enel doing up there with the space pirates and an army of automatons? Okay, let me catch a breath here. That's 31 questions so far for those of you who are keeping score, and those are only questions about the geography of One Piece. But what about the over 1,000 characters of the story? Well, we have plenty of questions about those too. Some important characters exist only in legend. We haven't even seen them, and yet they have an impressive impressive presence in the series. The first that comes to mind is Rock's 𝙲𝚎𝚐𝚐. Who is he? What was his goal? How did he gather such a powerful crew? And what was his ultimate fate? And what about the greatest scientific mind of the world government, the creator of the pacifista and the artificial devil fruits? Who is Dr. Vegapunk? Along a similar line, we also have 𝙻𝚎𝚐𝚐𝚗𝚍. Where is the Pirate King's third in command? Was he Crocus's mysterious samurai friend? Oh, and yeah, who is Charlotte Snack? There is a whole sweet commander that we never got to see on Whole Cake Islands. And while we're super curious about these mysterious figures who've yet to be properly introduced, we're also missing some of our old friends that we just know will play a role in the story to come. Some of these we're bound to hear from very soon, and others we might be waiting a while, but in the meantime we have to ask, where exactly is Sabo right now? What happened to Vivi? What happened to Moria? What's the status of the Shichibukai who were being hunted by the world government? So where is Mihawk? Where's Boa Hancock, and what about Weevil? Oh yeah, and is Edward Weevil actually Whitebeard's son? You know, you do have to admit that the mustache resemblance is uncanny. And what about the people that he's after? Where are the remaining division commanders of the Whitebeard pirates? What role is Crocodile gonna play at the end of the story? And what is the big secret from his past that Ivankov threatened him with? Where is Uruj, the member of the worst generation we probably know the least about? With all of his peers being really fleshed out at this point, surely he also has a role to play in the future as well. There are also still a lot of loose ends to tie up from recent arcs, some other characters we'd still like to check up upon, for example. How will Charlotte Katakuri factor into the future of One Piece? Will he ally with Luffy in the final war? What happened to the Fishman pirates after Whole Cake Island? Did they survive Big Mom's onslaught? Speaking of which, what happened to Big Mom's children who came to Wano after they were knocked off the waterfall twice? Oh, and speaking of Big Mom, are Big Mom and Kaido gone? Dead? Forever? In most series, this wouldn't be a question given their current status of being submerged in lava, but this is One Piece we're talking about, and they might just have the will to survive on their side. What about the characters we haven't seen in a really long time? We already mentioned Enel a little bit when we talked about the moon, but I'm talking back even further than that, all the way to the East Blue. Where did Axe-Hand Morgan escape to after his cover story? When will Jin finally reunite with the crew? And will we see the most important character in the entire series again? Gaimon? Well, probably on Laugh Tale, since he, of course, is the One Piece. And then finally in this category, we of course have plenty of characters who we've just seen relatively recently and who are certainly gonna play an important role in the final saga, but who still have a ton of mystery around them. Most recently, we have, of course, Buggy. How the hell did he become a Yonko? And in Wano, we still have a lot of questions about Toki. Primarily, why did she jump into the future from the Void Century in the first place, and who was she there? What about Bonnie and Kuma, who we saw in the Reverie? What is their connection? We know that Kuma was a revolutionary, but why was his epithet the Tyrant? And why did he agree to Vegapunk's experimentation? Also, since Bonnie can manipulate her age, how old is she really? And who is she really? And speaking of Kuma, what about the enigmatic leader of the revolutionaries and Luffy's absentee father, Dragon? Why did he abandon his son? What is his absolute goal as leader of the revolutionary army? And what's his devil fruit power? The prevailing theory is that he holds a wind or storm type fruit, but this has yet to be confirmed. And if Kaido turned out to be a fish, then who knows what misdirection Oda may be employing here. What about the enemies of the revolutionaries? The world government. There's still so much mystery surrounding this entire organization as a whole as well. So before the end of the series, we still need to know, what is the SSG? Who is the leader of Sword? Is Tashigi actually connected to Kuina in some way, or is their resemblance simply coincidence? How about the admirals. Where in the world did they conscript Fujitora and Ryokugyu from? Both of them are absolute powerhouses that the government just plucked from out of nowhere. Originally, the prevailing theory was that Fujitora and maybe Green Bull were from Wano, but does that still seem likely? Will we get the backstory of any of the admirals? Did Aokiji actually leave the Marines, or is he just spying on Blackbeard? Who are the Gorosei? We do know virtually nothing about these shadowy figures that helm the world government. How old are they actually? Do they have powers, or do they serve in purely a non-combative role? And then of course, who is Imu, the true hidden ruler of the world government and the world as a whole? How old are they? What powers do they have? And since we recently learned about the Gorosei's special secret friend Shanks, we still need to ask, why is he able to just waltz into Merijoa for a meeting with the Gorosei? Did he know the importance of the Nika fruit when he stole it from the world government? What are his true intentions or allegiances? How powerful is Shanks really? And perhaps the most pressing question of them all, is Shanks the father of Makino's baby? How about the man who left Shanks with his trademark scar? Luffy's biggest rival for the Pirate King's crown, Blackbeard. Before the end of the series, we still need to know Marshall D. Teach's backstory. What is his connection to rocks, given that he named his ship the Razor, the Saber, oh, not the Razor, the Saber of Zebek? Why does he know so much about the world, and what is his ultimate goal? And of course, the most mysterious of all, why doesn't he sleep, and how can he have 2 devil fruit powers? If you're still keeping track at home, that brings us to 90 mysteries yet to be solved in the series, but we're far from done yet. All of these people and places still don't get into the core mysteries of One Piece. What is the true history of this world? We still need to know what has happened during the Void Century. What is the true past of the world government? And what was the ancient kingdom that they clashed with? What was the great cleansing that led to the presumed end of this ancient kingdom? In Wano, we learned a whole lot about Luffy's devil fruit, but for every answer that we received, we had more questions pop up in their place. Luffy is definitely the next Joy Boy, or just Joy Boy, but we still have to wonder, who was Joy Boy, or is Joy Boy? And did the giant straw hat in Merijoa belong to him originally? We do know that Luffy's fruit wasn't actually the Gomu Gomu no Mi. It turned out to secretly be the Hito Hito no Mi model Nika all along, but who or what is the sun god's Nika in this world? And speaking of his very special fruit, we still need a certain Dr. Vegapunk to explain to us what exactly devil fruits are in the first place. We still kind of don't really know. What about Luffy's other special powers that go beyond his amazing feats of haki or devil fruit usage? What is the will of D and the secret behind his and so many other characters' mysterious middle initial? What is the voice of all things, and why can Luffy hear it? Thanks to Sukiyaki's and Robin's conversation in the latest chapter, we also just learned that the ancient weapon Pluton is located in Wano, paying off a mystery that was introduced all the way back in Alabasta. We've learned quite a bit about Shirahoshi, aka Poseidon, but what are the ancient weapons? What was their purpose? We know that Pluton is a battleship of some kind, but who created it? And while we're at it, who created the other mysterious massive boat, the Noah? And for as much as we've heard about the Pluton and Poseidon, we've learned absolutely nothing about Uranus. What and where is this final weapon? And then of course we're missing the ultimate mystery, the treasure that Luffy has been searching for since chapter 1 and the title of the story. What is the One Piece? Before we get into the most interesting questions though, there are still some other miscellaneous things that simply need to happen before the end of the series. We still need to know what the egg was on the Oro Jackson. We still need to see the Ope Ope no Mi's immortality surgery come into play in some way or form. We need to see the Grand Fleet reappear during the final war. And there are a few things that aren't super necessary, but we'd really like to see them, so get your pen and paper and start writing those letters to Oda. A lot of fans would love to see another Davy Bat fight, for instance, but with higher stakes. We'd also love to see the Thousand Sunnies 𝚬𝚘𝚙𝚎 make an appearance as well. And while we're now clearly in the era of God Usopp, I really would do a lot to see Sogeking just one last time before the end. I mean, people really want to see God Valley, but I'm partial to Sniper Island here, honestly. And hey, if they made it to 𝙻𝚎𝚐𝚐, surely the Straw Hats can make it into your heart. Well, this brings us to a whooping 115 mysteries we need solved and things we need to see in the final saga of One Piece. But there's still one very important category to go. Things that still need to be resolved with the Straw Hat crew themselves. We've spent 25 years following the adventures of Luffy and his crew. Each of the Straw Hats has a dream, and we just know we'll see them achieve their goals by the end of One Piece. For Roronoa Zoro, we still haven't got an explanation about his missing eye, for instance. We also got some massive hints, but no confirmation that he has relatives in Wano. Oda went out of his way to deny that Zoro's father was Ushimaru, the daimyo of Ringo, but if not Ushimaru, then who? And now that he's been wielding Oda's Black Blade Enma, we'd love to see him forge a Black Blade of his own. Oh, and what was with his standoff with the Grim Reaper? Of course, now that he's presumably conquered death, he still has an even more formidable foe to defeat as well. Before the end, we need to see Zoro take on Mihawk and become the greatest swordsman in the world. Usopp also has plenty of goals to accomplish as well. He has plenty of lies that still need to come true. We'd love to see him landing a force of 8,000 men, preferably giants of course, become a true warrior of the sea, and reunite with his father Yasopp. The chef of the crew, Sanji, still owes us some answers as well. His explanation for his fire powers is his burning passion, and many have theorized that it has something to do with Lunarian DNA. But we still need a straightforward explanation. Why the hell can you conjure fire, Sanji? And for someone so obsessed with romance, will he ever find love and reunite with Viola or Pudding or hell, Nami? But more importantly than his love for women is his love for cooking. So we need to see him finally find the sea that he's always dreamed of, the all blue. We don't really have too many questions about Nami herself, but given that she was adopted after being found by Belmare, we could still ask where she's originally from and who her parents are. It doesn't really matter, but given that we've gotten a lot of extra backstory for Sanji and Zoro recently, and everyone on our crew seems to secretly have special parents for some reason, it could very much still happen. What absolutely needs to happen is that Nami needs to achieve her dream of completing a map of the entire world. With Chopper, we still have a few questions about his zone fruit. We've speculated that his monster point is a forced awakening, but we could still use some confirmation from Oda here. Also, given that we've only ever really seen him as a human reindeer hybrid, we have to ask, can Chopper go full human form? I mean, I don't really want to see it because it would probably be uncanny and terrifying, but I still do have to ask. By the end of the series though, our favorite doctor still needs to cure the world's diseases. Maybe he won't get every single one, but a great one for him to cure, for instance, would be the laughing side effect of the smile fruits, allowing him to further restore the country of Wano. With Robin, most of her big mysteries we've already covered in the section about the true history, since that's basically her dream, to uncover the true history. However, there's still a very pressing questions. Where is her cowgirl hat? We can only pray that her signature hat makes the return in the final saga. In order for us to uncover all that true history, she also needs to find the remainder of the poneglyphs and decipher them all. Given that we just now basically found out what the very first poneglyph we saw in Alabasta said, it would be really nice if Oda could give us some translation of the other poneglyphs as well. Frankie isn't too mysterious of a figure. He kind of lets it all hang out. Sometimes a little bit too literally, I feel. But before the end of the series, we're sure to see him sail his dream ship, the Thousand Sunny, around the globe. Brook, our favorite skeletal musician, obviously has to reunite with Laboon, but we'd also like to see how the #1 bop Bing Sake fits in with the entire story, as has been highly speculated, especially in regards to Love Tale and the One Piece. We don't really have too many questions about Jinbei either, but we do want to see him achieve his goal of brokering peace between fishmen and humans, as well as seeing the fishmen return to the surface. We also don't have too many questions for Yamato except who her mother is, but we do have a lot of questions about our captain, Monkey D. Luffy, such as who is his mother, and is it Crocodile? And while we're at it, who is his grandma, because we don't know who Dragon's mom slash Garp's wife slash partner was either. We also need to see him reunite with his mentor Shanks, as well as return his signature straw hat, in a moment that's sure to leave the fans around the world in tears. We also still need to get confirmation on what the mysterious dream that he shares with Roger is. And last but certainly not least, we need to see Luffy become the king of the pirates. Oh, and actually for Luffy's mom, well, there is this extremely wild theory out there that you really shouldn't miss.